It started with a bottle, not a bullet, not a bomb. A single bottle thrown into the humid Detroit night. But what followed was 5 days of fire, fury, and a reckoning that the nation still hasn't fully answered for. Why did an unlicensed bar raid turn into a full-blown military occupation of an American city? Why did tanks roll through black neighborhoods in the Motor City? Not to protect, but to suppress. And most importantly, what really happened during the 1967 Detroit Riot? Why has the truth been buried beneath decades of political spin and public amnesia? Detroit in 1967 was a paradox. It was America's fourth largest city, the beating heart of the auto industry, the birthplace of Motown. But for black residents, it was also a city under siege by policies, police, and poverty. Was Detroit ever really a land of opportunity for all, or just for some? According to the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, by 1967, nearly 70% of the city's African-American population lived in overcrowded, substandard housing. Federal redlining policies, yes, the ones officially drawn up by the government, had boxed them into neighborhoods like Black Bottom and Paradise Valley, which were later destroyed in the name of urban renewal. White flight to the suburbs accelerated after World War II, draining the city's resources while leaving its poorest residents to fend for themselves. Jobs were drying up, schools were failing, and the police. They weren't protectors. They were occupiers. At 3:35 a.m., Detroit police raided the United Community League for Civic Action, an unlicensed after-hours bar known locally as a Blind Pig. Over 80 people were inside, celebrating the return of 2 black Vietnam War veterans. It was supposed to be a simple raid, a formality, but by 5 a.m., a crowd of angry onlookers had gathered. When the police started hauling people into vans, one knows who threw a bottle, then another, and then all hell broke loose. Windows shattered, stores were looted. Flames licked the walls of the neighborhood. But was this lawlessness? Was it the voice of a people who had gone unheard for too long? The Detroit Free Press reported that within hours, more than 200 fires had been set. Mayor Jerome Kavanaugh called it urban guerrilla warfare, but residents called it something else: a rebellion. Governor George Mitt Romney's father mobilized the Michigan National Guard. President Lyndon B. Johnson, pressured by local officials, sent in federal troops, over 4,700 paratroopers from the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions. For the first time since the Civil War, the U.S. military was deployed to quell unrest in an American city. But what does it say about a democracy when it needs tanks to silence its own people? News cameras captured soldiers marching down residential streets with bayonets drawn. Snipers both real and rumored added to the panic. A 4-year-old girl named Tanya Blanding was shot and killed when National Guard troops opened fire on her home, mistaking a cigarette lighter for a sniper flash. Perhaps the most chilling story to emerge was the Algiers motel incident. 3 young black men were shot dead by white Detroit police officers inside the motel. No weapons were found on the victims. No officers were convicted. John Hersey's 1968 book, The Algiers Motel Incident, revealed a story of brutality, cover-up, and cold-blooded execution. How many other stories like this were never documented, never punished, never even believed? By the time the smoke cleared, the toll was staggering. 43 people dead, 33 of them black. Over 1,000 arrests, 2,500. Businesses looted or burned, more than $40 million in damages, nearly $400 million today. But these numbers don't capture the psychological toll, the community trauma, the systemic scars left behind. Detroit would never be the same. Insurance companies redlined the city further. Businesses refused to return. White flight became a flood. The city's population declined by more than 500,000 in the next 2 decades. In response, President Johnson created the Kerner Commission to investigate the root causes of the unrest. Its 1968 report was blunt. Our nation is moving toward 2 societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. It placed the blame not on rioters, but on white racism institutional neglect, and economic inequality. The commission recommended sweeping reforms: invest in education and jobs, reform policing, dismantle housing discrimination. But what happened instead? America shifted from civil rights to law and order, from addressing root causes to criminalizing symptoms, from prevention to punishment. In recent years, there's been a push to reframe 1967 not as a riot, but as a rebellion. Scholars, artists, and residents argue that calling it a riot erases the structural violence that sparked it. It frames black anger as irrational rather than justified. University of Michigan professor Heather Ann Thompson writes, "It was not a spontaneous outburst of violence. It was a response to decades of exploitation, segregation, and abuse." So we return to the question, what really happened during the 1967 Detroit Riot? It was more than a riot. It was more than a rebellion. It was a scream, a warning, flare fired into the American night sky. And like so many warnings from the past, we still haven't truly answered it. Detroit's scars are still visible. Abandoned schools, and generational poverty, and unequal policing. But so is its resilience. What happened in 1967 wasn't the end of Detroit's story. It was a turning point. The question is, did we listen? Or are we still waiting for the next bottle to shatter?